Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our 15th Scranton Isolation Informance. We started our school year live and in person and decided to we've been doing really extensive testing of asymptomatic people and decided to take a little hiatus for a week or two to just kind of make sure we have all our numbers right and continue testing. We're getting good advice from our alumni doctors. And so we're isolated again. And we thought we'd come back. And this time I'm really excited because this is a great topic that actually Kenny Rampton came up with. But first, before we get going, I'd like to introduce my co-host today, is a senior at the University of Scranton. He is a percussionist and bass singer in both our bands and our choir. He's also our performance music work study student and work study supervisor, and he's a senior nursing major. Joe Link. Joe, you want to tell us a little more about yourself and your interest in your career of nursing?
Sure. Yeah, so like Boga said, my name is Joseph Link. I'm a senior at the University of Scranton studying nursing. And I'm hoping after this year that I'm able to go off and take my boards and get my RN license. I'm hoping to work around where I'm from, which is just outside of Philadelphia. I'm most interested in going into the field of oncology because that's what my mom does. And after how many Take Your Child to Work Day, I just see how amazing the field of oncology is because it just seems to be progressing and just transforming itself every week, month, day, year, everything. It's just a field that's evolving so much, and it's something I'd really like to be a part of.
Cool. And then the blonde there is my golden boy from the class of 94. I have your year, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So Chris came in. Kenny, you'll love this. Chris walked into our rehearsal room for the very first time, into a trumpet section of like 12 upperclassmen, a trumpet section. So there was a little bit of a vibe when he walked in. And he walked in, he was a little bit pigeon-toed then, and he sat at the very end of the section, and he started to warm up, and everybody's heads came up. And they all looked down the section, and the lead trumpet player, up till that point, started collecting all the solo cornet parts and passing them down to him without saying a word. And he actually, he studied some with your band leader. And he graduated from the university in 94, went on to Georgetown Medical School, where he went to medical school while also subbing with major orchestras and playing in a nationally top 10 ranked ska band. I don't even know what ska is, but he got around. And he would go to his first class in the morning straight from the gig. After that, I'm going to let him tell you about the career, but right now he is the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Medical Officer and Senior Vice President for the Mary Washington Healthcare System. This is Dr. Christopher D. Newman.
Yep. Hi.
Tell us about he's also a professional trumpet player. So about that symbiosis, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, music has been part of my life since the very beginning. It's funny that a lot of people say, well, you do music as a hobby. And I say, no, I'm a musician. I'm a doctor on the side. It's almost that kind of thing. That's how my life has almost been. But it's really been a duality since the very beginning. I've never stopped playing music. And as Cheryl said, I would play a gig out late at night, and I'd be, rounding on patients at 6 a.m. the next day at the hospital. So that's just been my life. After I finished my training at Georgetown, I became a small town doc in Southern Illinois outside of St. Louis. I had massive student loan debt and was broke. So I went out there, and it was sort of a physician underserved area. And I was kind of like the town doc. And it was just an amazing experience. And I got to meet a bunch of older, and they were in their 80s at the time, jazz musicians who played in the classic big bands back in the day. And that whole Mississippi River Valley was just ripe with a lot of cool musicians. And they sort of got me playing with them, and it was just an amazing time. Moved back to Pennsylvania and lived in Allentown area for 14 years, and practiced at Lehigh Valley Hospital, health system, ran their hospitals program for a number of years. And then I went and got a business degree at University of Virginia and became chief medical officer at Penn State Health St. Joe's, and worked with the Penn State Health System for 4 years before a year ago I got the opportunity to come down here with the Mary Washington Health System just south of DC. Still play regularly. I play with the Fredericksburg Symphony down here, Fredericksburg Big Band. Still do freelance gigging.
Orchestra.
Yeah, I come up, I drive up to Scranton, play with the brass orchestra. That's right. So yeah, music is a very, very important part of my life.
And just so you know, of all the things you've done, the thing that impresses my husband most is that when you were in Reading, you got to be on the sidelines at the Penn State football games.
Yes, that's right.
I saw you on TV. You went insane. I thought something happened. Cheryl, come here, quick! You got to see the TV. I was like, oh my God, it's what? Newman, it's Newman. But not least, of course, the guy who was the idea man behind tonight's broadcast, and has been one of our beloved guest artists. Our jazz band had so much fun when he was here playing with them. Kenny does it all. He plays with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, which of course is led by Wynton Marsalis, University of Scranton, class of 1996, honorary doctorate. I don't know if you know that, Kenny.
I didn't know that.
Class of 96. And I always tell everybody, oh, he's one of my alums. He's with the Sesame Street Band. He was the guy who really kind of put together that Sesame Street 50th anniversary concert with the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, which is one of my favorite things that band ever did. Played with Ray Charles and has this incredible commitment to music education and jazz education through his jazz outreach initiative in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Kenny, tell us more about yourself and where this idea came from. What gave you the interest in music as a healing art?
All right. Well, first of all, Cheryl, thanks for putting this together and for having me. You're awesome. It's a pleasure to be part of anything that you do. Christopher and Joseph, it's a pleasure to meet both of you.
Yeah.
Cheryl and I had a conversation not too long ago, and I just kind of mentioned that I feel that, music is part of the healing arts. And, thank you for giving me credit for this, but this was you putting this together, and I'm happy to discuss that statement. I don't think I talked about it much more than just making that statement, but I can certainly talk about it beyond that statement because I fully believe music is part of the healing arts because it's healed me more times than I can count. I'll share a short story about that in the most basic sense, an example of music as being healing. I was one time doing a gig in the Village in New York City, in Greenwich Village, with a guitar player and singer, blues singer, who was one of my best friends, Bill Sims. He passed away not too long ago. But it was a trio gig with Bill singing, playing guitar, another friend playing acoustic bass, and I was playing trumpet. And it was pretty much all acoustic except for the microphone he was singing through. So I was getting to use lots of mutes and, create a lot of nuance and have fun. And it's one of those many gigs that we've all done where the band at 3 people outnumbered the audience. And before I go on, we were just joined by one of the greatest musicians on the planet, Wycliffe Gordon. What's happening, Wycliffe?
Hey, how you doing, Ken?
Good, great to see you.
People in the universe.
Yes, mine too. It's great to see you.
Good to see you as well. Try, don't stop me.
No, it's all good. It's great to see you, man. So I was just talking about an example of a very basic example of how music can be a part of the healing arts. An experience I had where it was a trio playing in a club in Greenwich Village where it was a trio, one guy sitting at a table and a waitress and a bartender. That's all that was there. So at the time I was looking at it like this is a throwaway gig. We were just having fun. It was acoustic, so I could use mutes and explore colors and play with a pixie and plunger and hat mute and all, different things that we like to do. That we don't normally get to do because most situations are too loud to play with any nuance. And it was, we had a blast playing, and I didn't really think of it beyond that at the time because we knew we weren't going to make any money because it was a door gig. And so at the end of the gig, as Bill was figuring out how to split $5 between three people, this guy who was at the gig, he was there the entire time, came up to us, and he had tears in his eyes. And he came up to thank us for playing, and he was crying. It wasn't just tears; he was crying. And I was like, man, do we sound that sad? And he's like, no, man. He said, I came here to drown my sorrows because my girlfriend just dumped me. I was depressed. I just wanted to get drunk and forget about it. And I heard you play, and it just brought me so much joy and happiness. I just wanted to thank you. And in that moment, that was an epiphany for me. I realized that what we do is so far beyond ourselves. Even if there's only one person in the audience, if we can affect them in a positive way, change our vibration so they come up to us and tell them how happy what we did made them. That's when I realized, man, this music is not about me feeding my ego. It's not about me making money. It's not about anything other than really affecting other people and touching them and raising their vibration. So he's going to go out to the corner deli and get a cup of coffee or buy a newspaper or whatever. He's going to smile to the guy behind that counter, and he's going to spread that joy beyond himself. And that's what we do in a nutshell in music. We change vibration, and that, I shouldn't say we, because we're really a vehicle for, in my opinion, I feel the music to flow through from a higher source to help people. So ever since that moment, every concert I've played ever since then, I sit in a corner. No, people don't notice me doing it. I do it where nobody's going to see me. I find a dark corner somewhere. I close my eyes. I take three deep breaths in through my nose, out through my mouth, and I set my intention. And I ask to be guided to help somebody who needs some help, to help music, to bring somebody some love in their life, or to help them feel better than they did when they got there, when they leave, so they're feeling better. In the very most basic, simple sense, I feel very strong about it, that music helps heal people. It helps heal them spiritually. It helps them psychologically. It helps in so many ways. And there have been studies that I've been made aware of where they say that certain notes actually affect the vibration of different parts of the body and things like that. I haven't studied that, but I have read a little bit about that, and that wouldn't be at all surprising to me. I would actually be very interested in learning more about that if anybody has any information that way to share with me. But at the very most basic essence, man, music can make you feel good, and it can make other people feel good. And when you feel good, you're healthier. So that's just the basis of kind of the conversation Cheryl and I had about this, is really kind of coming from that kind of a vibe. Now, when you're conscious about it and you set your intention for what you do as a musician, your intention is for it to reach somebody in a positive way and help them with any struggles they may have. Then it goes to another level. And I've gotten letters. I can't even count how many letters I've gotten from people in my career that I didn't know, who sent me a letter saying, man, I went to hear Winton because I was ready to quit teaching. One guy said he's ready to quit teaching. He'd been teaching for years and years, and he went to hear Winton just to get some inspiration because he's followed Winton his entire career. And Winton was great. He said, but what I remember most is a solo you played on Senior Blues, he said. And he said, I don't remember what you played, but I remember the way it made me feel, and it made me want to keep teaching. So little things like that where we can affect somebody in a positive way, it makes a difference in the world. I fully believe that. So that's, I can go on and on, but
We all, certainly Wycliffe and I both have personal things that we're on board, but I'm hoping that maybe Chris Newman could shed some more empirical light on what we for us is self-evident, but really in more of a way to our heart. Can you bring the mind part to that, Chris, and give us?
Definitely. So a little bit. So as I knew this talk was coming, I did a little research because I agree with Kenny. Music personally to me has given me that feeling, and the way it can help others. It becomes evident that music is healing. But I wanted to try to understand a little bit the science behind it. And interesting, some of the history around music as a healing art. This is not a new concept. even in ancient times, there's quotes of Pythagoras, who was one of the first ancient Greek physicians, that talked about music in medicine and how he used music to heal people back then. There have been mentions in the Middle Ages as they were training physicians, and physicians didn't have any science or tools at that time, but they mandated a music class for all future physicians way back in the Middle Ages. And then even as back as far as World War I, the formal music therapy as a profession started to evolve. And that's when we began to understand a little bit the science behind what does music do as healing. And by World War II, the vets, as they were injured and disabled, either from PTSD or physical injuries, the military decided to invest in music as part of the rehab that they did, and they noticed that soldiers who had this musical therapy recovered at a faster rate than those that didn't, and that's when really the science part of this came about. So why is this? Well, there is nothing that stimulates the brain more than music. Listening music stimulates the brain quite a bit, but playing music stimulates the brain the absolute most, meaning the most parts of the brain. Even doing complex math or physics only will stimulate a portion of the brain, but performing music stimulates almost every aspect of the entire brain simultaneously. And just as I was, looking, the cerebellum in the back of the brain affects tempo and balance. So when people dance or they tap their foot or move, the cerebellum is activated. The hippocampus is memory, and there's just a lot of motor memory, muscle memory, remembering how to play changes, remembering pitch. So the hippocampus, the amygdala, is the part that senses emotion, and that lights up when we're listening or playing music. The frontal cortex also is a very, very important part that lights up. Auditory centers, physical centers, sensory centers. There's so many aspects of the brain. There's not any other activity, sports, academic or otherwise, that lights up the entire brain altogether. And this has been proven with something called functional MRIs. So they're able to actually do an MRI on somebody when they're playing music, and they can see the entire brain lighting up. And they think this is why it's a healing. They're using this now. They're training soldiers with traumatic brain injury. They're not having them listen to music. They're having them learn how to play an instrument. And they're finding that gets the whole brain recovering at faster. It's using the parts of the brain that normally wouldn't be used and helps heal the part of the brain that may be damaged. So there's something even about playing music, even though they're never going to be necessarily a good musician, and it might be very rudimentary, but it's that process that really becomes healing throughout, just both physically and emotionally. And, I've just seen that multiple times personally in my life.
Chris, could you explain, so maybe you could explain what neuroplasticity is in a better way and shorter way than I can. But my question is, everything we're hearing now about all the new things that everybody knows about neuroplasticity, and what that has to do with both development and healing. Does music, both as a performer and a listener, stimulate neuroplasticity?
Yes, both. But so they initially thought it was only listening to music.
First, tell us what that is. Either you or I'll put Joseph on the spot.
Yeah, well, there's you only eventually at a certain age, you only have so many neurons, so many neural pathways, and they don't regenerate. So that's when you have a brain injury, you have a spinal injury, that can be permanent catastrophic injuries because you don't really regenerate. But there's so many nerves and so many pathways in the brain that we don't use. And what music can do is stimulate those other parts of the brain. So interestingly, with stroke patients, they can lose their ability to talk, but they can sing. If you give them a piece of paper, they can sing lyrics, they can't speak them. So, so there's something there. And as you do that over time, they can slowly get their ability to speak back as they train other parts of the brain. That's that neuroelasticity, going forward. And, lots of studies, initially it came out, thought it was just Mozart, and it's not just Mozart. It's all music, really. And what they would do, I read a recent study about this economics professor that played classical music for the first 15 minutes of the economics class and then taught the lecture. And then he asked the students to listen to that piece of music right before they were going to bed, before their first exam, and then as they were going to the class. And that kind of gelled their memory. There's something we can remember tunes and lyrics to tunes we haven't heard in 30 years. I can remember tunes from, the 70s when I was a kid that I may not have heard in 20, 30 years, and I can sing the whole song. There's something about music and the memory that it has there, that it supercharges the brain, supercharges the memory. So just listening is definitely important. But I've read this one scientist, Dr. Barry Bittman, who's a neurologist, and he came up with the concept of having people learn to play music, even if they aren't going to become a musician. And he found that it was statistically significant, the people who listened versus the people who perform the music, it lights up even more of the brain, and they get even bigger benefit than just listening to music. So they're both important, but playing music is ultimately the most active for the brain.
So one of my pet peeves, and Kenny and Wycliffe, I'd love to know if you agree or disagree. It makes me insane when people justify or try to advocate for music education through other fields by saying it makes you better at math, or it makes you better at this, or because in and of itself, it is worthwhile. I just feel like, we don't need to it's so good for the whole person that it stands on its own, and we don't need to justify it through other academic disciplines. What do you guys think about that in terms of the way a lot of this stuff is used in conversations about music education advocacy?
Well, I'll start quickly from my personal experience. I was born listening to music. My father played Beethoven and Mozart, so we had classical piano music growing up around the house. So I would probably be a bad spokesperson because music. I listened to music. It did not make me better at math, and maybe I was listening to the wrong kind. However, what you all were talking about earlier, not to get off the subject, I'll let Kenny deal with it. I'm sure those things are true, but when it came to music or math, for me, I would just, okay, math is cool, but I'd rather do music. And if music is going to make me better at math, I figure if I get better at music, I'll just, I'll be better at something. But math was, math, geometry, calculus, all of those things. And I'm sure they have their place, but I'm with you. Music makes people, I think, just better people. I think music helps us to get to that best side of ourselves. So if it helps you to focus, I don't know. Someone asked me that question, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, trying to get me to make that point. I was like, you probably need to ask someone else that. You ask me questions about music. And, I love what music has done for me, and listening to what Kenny said earlier. I think I know for a fact we both had those types of things to happen because, and when I teach now, I tell students, a great gig is good if you play all the parts, if you play a great solo, or if you have a great night, but it means absolutely nothing because we're not really playing for ourselves. And I mean, you go through that and you want to learn, but once you learn the importance of what music can do for other people, then you really, really enjoy playing music. And it may not be your only purpose, but it's largely a part of it. And I just try to always keep that in mind when I'm performing. the who's listening. I'm not caught up in my head. I want to listen to the other musicians. I want to be a part of that joy. So it means that I have to listen as well. So maybe Kenny can give you a better answer. Music may make you better at math. Music made me better at music. That's it.
All right. Yeah, I'm with you on that for sure. To Cheryl's point, I've seen a lot of studies where they talk about kids who study music do better in math and English and all other subjects. And it's a shame that they feel they have to do that to justify teaching music and to justify getting kids involved in music. And I think that's Cheryl's point, is she doesn't like the fact that they do that. And I agree with her. It's a shame that they have to justify people getting involved with music, because music is music. And it does teach us all those things. If you analyze the music, there's a lot of math involved in what we do with music, especially as jazz musicians, in chord changes and understanding 2-5-1 progressions and what all those numbers mean. There's a lot of natural mathematics that factor into everything we play with music. My father was a musician and mathematician. Math was always easy for me in school. I was the top of my class, straight A's in math. In fact, I was salutatorian in my class. I did well in all subjects and I never studied. What I did was practice music. So there may be something to that studying music activates other parts of your brain that make other things logical to you and make them easy to you. But everybody's different. But to Wycliffe's point, man, music is music. And, and to Cheryl's point, like, to justify having a music program because it helps other subjects, I think is nonsense. It does, every other subject is incorporated into music. That's why musicians' brains light up the way that they do when we play music, like what Mr. Newman was describing, and I've read studies about that as well, how playing music activates every area of the brain, because it involves so much, and music is so important to study, because what we learn through studying music is so deep and so profound. Yeah, it has math and language. It also has empathy, diplomacy, democracy, problem solving, so many important things to humanity, frankly, that we incorporate when we develop our skills and our talents as musicians. That whether you go into music as a profession or not, the skill sets that you develop as a human being take you to another level to be successful in any field that you choose to go into. Which is I think, part of the joy of learning music is it teaches us about ourselves. For me, teaches me to be a better person, and it makes me want to be a better person, and I've got a lot of growth to do doing that in that area, just like everybody does, and another thing that I love about it is that growth is never ending. There's always something new to learn, so music is such an incredible teacher on so many levels. And I refer to music as an entity, like a spirit that is something that we're all dealing with, who and everybody deals with music on some level. It touches everybody's spirit and everybody's soul on some level. It's an invisible art form. You think about it, so it's so profound and so deep, and leads to so much and so many opportunities and possibilities for learning and for growing and for healing and for teaching on so many levels. It's just such a profound thing for me personally. And, I've been so blessed to be in the position I'm in, and the opportunities that have been presented to me as being a member of Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra, the opportunity to be able to create my own nonprofit organization, to pay it forward to my hometown community of Las Vegas, to bring people there and to teach. And it's more about teaching, raising consciousness than it is about teaching notes on a page. It's about humanity. And it's a pretty amazing art form. And I'm truly blessed to be a part of it.
It's interesting because, like, one of the things is you guys know, but I don't know how many of our viewers know. So we have a couple hundred kids every semester involved in the bands and the choirs and the orchestras at the University of Scranton. Although nobody's singing or playing wind instruments now, it is so important to them that we started beginner strings and beginner percussion, and we ordered steel drums because our school has a very strong focus on not exclusive of anything, but we do have very strong programs in general health professions. There's Christopher is one of our alums, and Joseph will be soon as a nursing major. And I see a whole bunch of our healthcare professions alums that are watching among our viewers. They need, I have found, and Joe and Chris, you can both address this, because I want to address first, how important and how we use music to self-medicate our emotional and mental health. And then I want to go to more specific, physical health things, because of course our mental and emotional health, yes, Christopher, stop me anytime, say, oh, shut up, you're not a doctor. But of course that impacts our physical health in a lot of ways. But I think, so for our students, they were so grateful that we were going to provide some way to make music, because for them, that gives them a chance to be recentered. And so many of them are in majors where they have to be right all the time. Music actually teaches you how to embrace being wrong. So it increases resilience, because if you don't identify your deficiencies, you can't correct them. So they can come to Houlihan after being right all day and just be totally wrong. And we all cheer mistakes because they give us a chance to fix something. And I think that, throughout time, music has been a source of comfort and self-medication and an outlet as well as an inlet. So it gives us a view of ourselves from a mental and emotional health perspective. It gives us a view of ourselves and a way to express ourselves both at the same time. So it's like a mirror and a window into ourselves. So as people who didn't major in music, Chris and Joe, tell us what it meant to you studying nursing and medicine and business and everything else you studied. Why was it important, or is it important to you to continue to make music, and how does that help you emotionally, sociologically, in every way to be ready for the other things that you do?
Yeah, for me, I personally, I had a duality. So up and through medical school. So I was a musician and I did the medicine, and I just burned the candle at both ends, and I did both. And I didn't view my music as, an addition or a sideline or anything like that. It was just sort of both became who I was. But that ended, and when I went into my internship and residency, and you're doing 100-hour weeks, 36-hour shifts in the hospital. I was living in an apartment. You just can't. I couldn't commit to any groups, and I couldn't commit to any kind of plan at home or practice because, I'd wake people up. I was getting home after everybody was asleep and leaving before everybody's awake. So I felt at that time that was the end, and that was where I was going to be moving, was to be just a physician, and had a good run with music. And I actually didn't play any music for 3 years. So I didn't take the horn out of the case for 3 years for my residency. Moved out to the Midwest for my first job as the small town doc, as I said earlier, and sort of got pulled out of retirement at that point. When I met a couple of those old jazz musicians out there that heard that I used to play, but physically, it was amazing how the lack of playing affected my emotional health and my physical health, and I didn't really realize it. Residency is an insanely stressful time, particularly back then before they had any regulations around hours and those kind of things. And it was really a brutal time, and I felt that it was probably just all that. And I underestimated how the lack of the music, how that being taken away, how that affected me. And when the dust settled and I started that first gig, there was just a piece of me missing. It was like somebody cut off my arm. It was just a piece of me missing. And it was amazing. My wife's not a musician. She enjoys listening to music, but she's big into, meditation. And she meditates. She's always trying to tell me to meditate. And there's nothing wrong with meditation. And there's a lot of, but I always tell her, I don't need to meditate. I'm a musician. So that's my outlet. That's how I stimulate my brain. And, if I get up, crack of dawn in the morning and blow some whole tones and play a little bit, and it just centers my myself as I hit the day. And, the second time music was taken away from me was essentially this pandemic. Another immensely stressful time running a healthcare system during this pandemic, with the life and death and stress involved with all of this. And, all my gigs dried up. Obviously, there's nothing playing, no trumpet playing right now. And it's unclear when that's going to start again. And I noticed, again, the stress, that outlet. So my second instrument is guitar, and I started playing more and more guitar just recently. And some guys in the neighborhood, and we jam a couple nights a week, and it just starts getting that part of the brain back, and I start feeling okay. I feel like I'm a normal human being again. I got that music back, and it's that the other thing about music is you get a benefit playing by myself in my basement, but I also love the benefit of playing with other people. It's that social interaction that you don't even get just hanging out with people. When you play music with somebody else, it's just a different type of conversation. It's a different type of community, and musicians are just a different type of animal. And it's great to have that part of myself.
I remember the call.
Yeah.
From Salem, Illinois, the night you picked the horn back up, and it was the first time you sounded like yourself. Because that was always how you dealt with frustration or adversity, and you had been missing that, and it was like a different person that trained me to pick up the phone for my own kids at 2 a.m. Sorry. Joseph Link, you had told me that you were afraid when you came back during COVID, there'd be no way to make music, that you were so glad there was. Why?
Well, I mean, before the pandemic started, I definitely really enjoyed coming to choir, especially on Thursday nights, because how it works at the U is we have our clinical on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. So I'd be up at around like 5 a.m. We'd have to trek over to the hospital, and we spend about 6 or 7 hours there just providing constant care to whichever patients we were provided that day. And honestly, I loved every second of it, but it does take a bit out of you, because that's just a part of the profession, is to make sure that someone besides yourself is totally okay at all times. And a lot of the times I would come back really tired and kind of out of it from the day. But when I got down to Houlihan and I just started singing in the choir, and like what Chris was talking about, that social aspect, it would just hang out with the other basses in my section. Honestly, it just kind of brought me right back. Didn't really feel tired anymore, and I was just ready to go. I felt super engaged.
Both Wycliffe and I have had, not in the not so distant past, periods of time that our ability to make music was taken away from us. And thank God for a temporary situation. And it's really funny because I am a terrible audience. And Chris knows this because he sat with me in Wycliffe too through concerts, and I'm like, "What'd you think of that? Oh, that needs drums," I'm definitely a more active rather than passive person. But I think that being unable, I had cancer surgery and was not able to play, and being unable to play opened to me the opportunity to listen in a new way. And I actually, when you have, a lot of pain and they give you the really good pain meds, they ration them. They don't just say, "Hey, anytime you need them, here you go." They just say, "Okay, now you don't get any for a while." And they don't really last that whole time. And I actually, and Chris actually sat in a chair next to me at the ICU and played music off his iPad for me. And when I thought that, oh my God, I need that drug, when I would listen in a really intent way and allow that music to just flow through me, I think in a way that maybe I really hadn't, in a way that was straight to my heart without going through my brain, I would immediately, even nurses and doctors commented, and Wycliffe, the nights that you would call from a bandstand and just lay the phone down so I could listen, like they would comment on how are you like not screaming in pain? You look so peaceful, and I would just fall right to sleep without even the meds. Is that like a hypnosis kind of thing? But not being able to play, it helped. I was able through listening to help physically relax and heal, but not being able to play did a real number on my brain and my heart.
I'll say I can say the same thing. For those that didn't know, 2015 I had a small stroke, a minor stroke, but a stroke nonetheless. And it took me a minute. I was April 4th, 2015. I was teaching a master class at Arizona State University. I just finished with the trombone studio and I was working with the jazz students. And now, it just kind of happened, just kind of came out of nowhere. I felt a little funny and I said something. I was like, man, what was that came out of my mouth? So without recounting the whole thing, going from being in the hospital to, they took my phone from me, but I had my watch on and they said, and I looked at my watch like 7:15. I was like, oh man, the gig's starting in 15 minutes. My brain was still on, I'm good. My body was not. So anyway, and I couldn't wait. I think I was in the hospital 4 or 5 days. Jump ahead, I get home. And the first thing I want to do is pick up my horn and play. And I picked my horn up. I felt, okay, kind of. And the sound that came out, I just set it back on the stand. I sat down to the piano, my right side. Anyway, just make a long story short, that's kind of my story. But the most devastating thing about having the stroke wasn't the stroke itself. It was bad enough. And, my wife said to me, she said, when I wanted to get back to playing, but nothing was connected. I had to do physical therapy. I got out of that pretty soon. Because they caught it early. It's millimeters from being really bad. But I had to do speech therapy and occupational therapy. And so I did that religiously. And then I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. I was kind of ashamed. I'm like, man, this shouldn't happen to me. I'm strong. I'm just, whatever. The most difficult thing for me was not being able to play. And I was out with April having lunch one day. And it's the middle of the day. And I think that's when it finally hit me. And I just started crying uncontrollably because I could not make music. I've been broke before, heartbroken, all of this. And I finally got to a place years later where I can talk about it and just not tear up because I said it didn't matter how bad things got. I didn't pay my bills, the lights were off, it was cold, it was such and blah, blah, blah. But going back to what we were talking about earlier, neural pathways, I think, and I know nothing about that, but I'm pretty sure that music was what helped to get those to connect again. And I remember I would just get up every morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock, go to the gym, trying to, strengthen my body, doing the exercises with my mouth and all of that. And, April wanted me to take off 6 months. I said, I can't take off 6 months. I'm not a musician. And about a month after being home or off, I was able to make a sound in the tuba. I tried to pick up my tuba, my trumpet, trombone, everything. And I was like, there was kind of a glimpse of a hope. And even connecting to what Dr. Newman said earlier about memorizing lyrics to songs we heard way back then. And even what you said about after Kenny was talking, I was thinking about that as well. We practice. There's only 12 notes, but we practice over and over. And maybe it's the repetition, the repetitive aspect of doing something over and over that we apply to other things that make us better at other things. So anyway, off that point, I was, every now and then, if I got tired, the photos, you can see me smiling after a gig and it's like half of my face is smiling. It looks kind of funny. I was like, oh, wow. I was tired, and I was at Dizzy's one night, and I did my first gig was with Temple. Terrell Stafford in the big band. And my sister Tanya was sitting at the back of the club, bawling her eyes out. I was like, "What's wrong with you?" She said, "These people don't know. They're just witnessing a miracle right now." And I would only play like, I think 3 or 4 tunes, but that was the absolute most difficult thing I think I ever been through in my life. And when I was going back to play it, I said, "Well, maybe you shouldn't play because," April said, "maybe you shouldn't play because you play really hard and, you might burst a blood vessel and die." I said, "Well, if I die playing, I think I would be cool with that. But if I had to live and couldn't play, it would be, I didn't know. And thank God I never had to find that out. And just recently, I had to go get some medical work. The only thing that could really calm me down, like an MRI machine, I see that thing, I'm just like, no, I never thought I was phobic. I would just close my eyes and I think about music. I try to think that if I'm hot, I try to think I'm cold, but something about music. And I said, "You on my mind if I hum to you." And the lady, she said, "No, whatever you have to do." And I was just like, and then all of a sudden I became cool. So that whole thing behind music, healing others, it's also help self-healing, and without having um, the I don't have the words to describe it. It's very grassroots, but that's just what it is. Always has been, and probably always will be for me. So that's it.
Hey, are
Yeah.
you hitting the stuff that you were thinking about when you mentioned this to me? Are we hitting the stuff that you were thinking?
Absolutely. To Wycliffe's point, I've had a couple times in my life where music has got me through. You mentioned MRIs. I've had to have a few myself. And they put you into that machine, it rolls in, and I sat there.
From imaging studies, believe me here.
Oh man, it's not fun. And I'm a little claustrophobic too, and for me, music is what got. I sat there humming tunes the whole time. Thinking music. That's what got. I would go over Freddie Hubbard solo on Caravan or whatever. I remember that one particular. But whatever it was, just humming music, whether I was verbalizing or just humming inside my mind. But music got me through those things. And there have been a couple instances in my life where I had to stop playing for medical reasons. One time I was going through an embouchure change. I had to change my embouchure, and I was trying while I was playing unsuccessfully by moving it, and then it would always shift back. And I was told by a couple of people who I respect that I needed to take time off. And so I actually took a month and a half off from playing the trumpet in order to be able to change my embouchure and start over. That's possibly the hardest month and a half of my life. Not being able to play and not knowing when I started playing again if I'd be able to relearn to play on a new embouchure. That, I haven't talked about that with too many people. I've talked about it with a few students who had to go through an embouchure change to help them through it. But thinking about it now, my eyes are starting to well up. It was such a difficult time in my life emotionally. And I think just back to like a year and a half, not even 2 years ago, I had to bail on a tour with Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra with Chick Corea because I had a problem with my neck and shoulder. Ended up I was in Las Vegas visiting my family, and I ended up in the emergency room for 2 days, and I couldn't pick up the trumpet and play. I came out of it through some, actually one specific friend of mine named Danny Falcone, who's a great trumpet player and has a very specific healing technique that he studied, and he applied to me and helped me get over that. When the doctors were saying I was going to have surgery, I saw that as a last resort, and luckily I didn't follow that advice and I went this other route. But I had to miss this tour with Chick Corea, which was really a bummer because I never, I'd played with him, but not toured with him. But I had to miss his tour, but I couldn't physically pick up the horn. I couldn't hold it in my hands to play because I had no strength in my right arm and my shoulder and my neck. It was all, and I was really scared I wouldn't be able to play again. And just the thought of not being able to play, to a musician is devastating. Like Wycliffe said, I would rather go out and burst a blood vessel playing and die like that than live the rest of my life not being able to play. I can't imagine that. It's just absolutely devastating, the thought of that. But what got me through it, when I was struggling, I couldn't lift up the horns. I was listening to music. I was, there's certain records that are go-tos for me that always have been, Sunny Side Up is one of those records. Sunny Side of the Street, that particular recording, Dizzy singing, it's always brought me so much happiness. I started singing it myself. I love it so much. But there's certain records that I listen to that help me to get through those periods of time that, thank God, they got me through it, And also, just hardship we all go through in life, man. I've been through 2 divorces, lost my father. There's so many different difficult things we all have to go through in life. Huh?
Did you see he held up 3 fingers? He's one up in you there.
3? Okay. Congratulations. I hope you'll always be winning that contest. But music gets us through so much, man. It's not only something that I love to do for so many reasons, but it's gotten me through so much hardship. I'm so indebted to music. It's been the greatest healer of my life.
When my daughter Maggie was in preschool, and Chris will remember this. No, you didn't know Maggie preschool. You knew Joseph. Maggie looked at her preschool teacher one day, she was 3, and said, "So, Mrs. Ballett, what instrument do you play?" And like the Sharon Barrett, who was the preschool teacher, who was wonderful, just said, "Well, Maggie, I don't play an instrument." And Maggie thought she was kidding. Maggie was like, "Ha, ha, 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 ha. But Weary, what instrument do you play?" And Sharon told her, I don't know how to play an instrument. And Maggie got very, very serious and looked at her, this little 3-year-old, and said, "I am so sorry for you. You mustn't be happy." How about that?
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah.
We have our first question from an audience member. People watching on Facebook, you can put your questions in the comments, and we have somebody that'll ship them over to us. Our new assistant director of performance music at the University of Scranton is with us, although not on the screen tonight. Please welcome the wonderful Janelle Decker. And our first question is from her.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janelle.
Everybody say hi, Janelle.
Hi, Janelle. Thank you.
Janelle Christopher wants to know, can playing music help correct anomalies in the brain with MS patients? I have someone close to me who plays every day and actually had an MS lesion disappear on their brain after at beginning the verge of being diagnosed with MS.
Yeah. I didn't see any studies specific to multiple sclerosis, but I saw multiple with a whole host of neurologic disorders. There's a whole host of studies about Alzheimer's disease and music, strokes, recovering from strokes after music, Parkinson's disease, post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injuries. So it would not surprise me MS would be just in that same bucket, that music would be able to heal the brain, from something like that.
We have a question for Joe Link. Joe, when you're a nurse, this is from Lorraine Carr. Joe, when you're a nurse, do you plan on using music in any way to help you care for your patients?
That's my Aunt Lorraine.
Lorraine.
Hi, Aunt Lorraine.
I think music is still going to be a big part of my life, either whether it's in practice or outside, because it's honestly helped to shape me who I am today. I definitely think that, anytime I head towards something stressful, like if I'm walking down to a building to take an exam, or if we're in the car ride on the way to clinical, it's just a certain way to kind of amp yourself up for the day and kind of prepare your personality so that you're ready to take on whatever your patients may throw at you that day. But I think definitely in practice, I would try to reference for a music therapy consultation. I'm not sure of exactly, the specifics of for each healthcare system on how you're able to get to there. But Chris, with you being the head of one of the healthcare systems, can you talk about how you would get a music therapy consultation?
Yeah, musical therapy consultations are usually at rehab hospitals where I've seen it, because I think it's that recovery phase. They use it to kind of so you're hospitalized for the acute phase where you know have the stent or the this or the that or the surgery, and then then it's the recovery phase, and that's where music has been a potent healer. So I think acute rehab hospitals are probably where you're going to find musical therapy departments and can get a musical therapy consult.
Okay.
We have a viewer. I guess I have to address it. Chris, you can explain it because it just sounded like it says, Cheryl, are you having a stroke as the broadcast goes on? You're slurring your R's. And it's because I'm tired. And it's Chris, you want to explain? You were there.
Yeah, it related to prior surgery and nerve damage from that surgery. And again, when you get tired, you can get the drooping. You had a Horner syndrome, I believe, afterwards, didn't you, Cheryl? Yeah. So yeah, and lymphatics are involved and the nerves are involved. So Cheryl, how many? Has it been 7 years? Did I get that right? Okay.
Yes, you did.
Major surgery for cancer, and every day feel very blessed that you're doing great.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things is we didn't really know how well I was going to be able to speak because they
That's right.
my tongue and also
Yeah.
the section. And it's interesting because humming is, I never had to go to speech therapy because by the time I was able to go to the speech therapy, I was speaking pretty clearly, other than when I get tired. But because I was humming, the vibrations seemed to help me build back muscle. And before I knew it, I was talking. And I think for matching pitch, you use so much that you don't even realize. Other question. What about my sister-in-law? She listens to music and does like music, but it seems to bother her all of a sudden. How is her brain different? She listens to music, seems to like music, but it bothers her. Does that mean something? Her brain is different from ours. Are there people that are bothered by music?
Not that I'm aware of. She just needs to listen to some better music. But, it's funny. Music is cross-cultural. We can enjoy music despite where you're from. It's really a connector that no matter what culture you grew up, what history, it really is something that connects people. It is deeply biological in all of us. And the concepts of, rhythm and harmony and, the timbre of the music and all those things, our brain is just wired for music. We don't just hear noise. We can hear pitch within a very narrow range. We can identify tempos within a very narrow range. And this is people with no training whatsoever in Western music, Eastern music, or otherwise. So it's really interesting that the brain, through evolution, has been wired for music on a very high level. So I'd say she needs to listen to the Jazz at the Lincoln Center Orchestra.
Yeah, it's probably the choice. I think I'll go with Chris on that.
Yeah.
Probably it can easily be the choice of music. It's like I'm pretty sure you all have this. There's a song that can take you back to your first kiss. If you're probably a teenager, there's a song if you can listen to it, it will awaken. It's like the sense of smell or something that happened when you were a child. And if I hear, and I mean, I guess the same thing works with other senses as well, but if I hear like, I heard Beethoven growing up in the house all the time. So anytime I hear anything that resembles, the Moonlight Sonata or Chopin etudes, I think about growing up in my house. Or if it's a particular song that was popular on the radio during that time, it's just like, wow, it doesn't, I may remember the words to the song, but it takes me back to like a particular day in my childhood or a particular time in my teenage years. So I think it's just maybe it's just a matter of the choice of music. I mean, I'm hard pressed to find. I may run into people that I don't like that kind of music. I don't like that kind of jazz. I don't like, but people that don't like music, yeah, that's you know, they should be studied. They really do.
I got a text from one of our alums that says that Kenny and Wycliffe were among my favorite guest artists ever. So our alumni remember their experiences making music with you. We question, could it be a timbre issue? The person that can't listen to music, what bothers her. Could it be a timbre issue? The teacher has seen many students with special needs on the autism spectrum that are adverse to music.
Well, noise, they can definitely put people with certain, neurologic conditions on the autism spectrum per se. They can be very photosensitive and noise sensitive. But it's interesting. Usually, music can calm people with the neurologic conditions such as that. So it may be how loud the music is played. It could be the timbre. It could be the style or the type of music. But music in general, that would be, I've never heard of such a thing. It's interesting, but music is something, since the dawn of time that has connected everybody, different cultures, and everybody loves music, and there's just certain things too, parts of music that inspire certain emotions. So like a minor scale, and no matter who you are, you listen, it gives you that certain melancholy feel, or a upbeat tempo gives you a certain feel versus a slower tempo. And so there's just these constant kind of universal themes with different aspects of music. I just think of the Psycho theme with the violins, before she's killed in the shower. Everybody knows that's not a beautiful song. It's perfect for music, for movies, and movie soundtracks. I mean, that's just, if you watch a movie without the music, without that music soundtrack, the music adds so much to the emotion of the movie.
But that's that. You're talking about that violin thing with the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that horror sound they using in Jaws, but they split the notes. Da. It's like
that's right.
and I just thought of something as you were speaking, and maybe you said the volume, and it probably can be the pitch, like it may be the high pitch, the low pitch, or certain frequencies. But anyway.
There's another thing that it could possibly be, and this is something I actually got into a discussion with somebody else online who's a healer who wanted to discuss music as being part of the healing arts last week. There are studies that show the A440 actually used to be A432, and they raised the pitch.
1910, we bought an organ that was our building's organ was built. The reason they bought it and got it cheap was because it was built at the old pitch, 1910.
A32, yeah.
40.
So it's the rate that the hertz vibrate at, right? So we're probably at about A442 now as a society. It's the pitch of the music has gone up a little bit. And I actually read somewhere that, what's his name, Goebbels, who was working for Hitler, demanded that the pitch be raised to A440 during that time to create angst in people. The vibration of A440, it's like if you listen to music that's recorded at A432 versus the same thing at A440, it creates a different feeling, a different vibration for people, and it can actually create angst. So that may affect somebody in a negative way. Just especially somebody who has autism, very well may have perfect pitch. And if they have perfect pitch at A432 and they're hearing music at A440, it could drive them crazy. So that's something that comes to mind for me.
It's even further because you just made me think. We just had a big conversation about this last week. I am teaching beginner violin to adults for haven't picked up a violin in 40 years. I'm now playing violin. So everybody behave or I'll call you up and I'll play for you to punish it.
I love it, actually.
Wind player. I was trying to figure out the first 2 or 3 weeks why I'm tuning the violins for them, but I'm tuning it to an A from the piano, and it never sounds in tune for me. And I know that the piano's in tune because it was just tuned, and I realized that it's a different temperament. Violin playing would make me nuts because you got equal temperament, you got unequal temperament, you got Pythagorean temperament, you have overtone series temperament, and even that much of a pitch. For the first week and a half, I was like anxious, tuning, like I was just feeling like unsettled, like something ominous,
Interesting.
I'm just getting used to tuning to a different temperament. And it was enough to make me just feel right. So if you have a question, I believe, from Uncle Dave.
Hi, Uncle Dave.
What's up, Uncle Dave?
We got the whole family here tonight.
Awesome.
He's a really good kid, you guys. I know I'm not supposed to tell you that because of his privacy, but I love your kid. So.
So we'll do that one. We'd like to know if there are any double-blind studies that show a relationship between listening to music and healing.
Many, 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 many. As I was looking at this, I mean, there's just so many. It's hard to notify them all. But there was one that I saw that was interesting with that Harvard University did in the last few years with people after a heart attack, and some of them had bypass surgery, and they randomized some of them to where they received their cardiac therapy without music, and some where they randomized it when they get their cardiac therapy after they were recovering they were played music during it. And here the group that got the music had increased exercise tolerance at the end. They had lower blood pressure, lower heart rates, and lower postoperative pain as compared to the group who received their therapy without music being played.
Wow.
So, and there's many, many, many that go down the road. They've even had double-blind studies looking at athletes and athletic performance when listening to music with training, and they're able to narrow it down to certain tempos for certain type of sports. For cyclists, they found an ideal tempo of 130 to 140 beat per minute tunes. They tend to perform better than other tempos. So, just lots of different things that I found when I was looking that just interesting, and it is. Done in double-blind studies, and how music is able to drastically affect outcomes.
I'll have to run in a few minutes, but were you going to say something, Boga? Because there was another question.
You go ahead. We'll get the other question.
Okay, no, someone asked something about a stutter or a stammer, so this has, I guess, to do with
Yes.
and just once. This is more of a story on my part. I was doing a recording with a Japanese gospel choir. It's on the verge of sounding kind of funny, and it's not politically incorrect. I'm just sharing the story because they sang gospel. They were singing like a Southern African American gospel choir. And when I heard it on the recording, I was like, wow, that's great. They have a gospel choir in Japan. So when I flew, I think we were somewhere in Europe, maybe, anyway, I forget where we were going to make the recording. We were at a festival together. I got there, and the whole choir was a Japanese choir. I'm like, wait a minute. So when somebody asked about a stutter or stammer, and it was very amazing to me that they could sing the words saying the lyrics, it had the inflections all together, but yet when you speak to them, some of them were English speaking, but the words that had L's and R's, they pronounced all the words correctly. It was very authentic when they were singing. But when you go to talk to them, they still
He froze.
speaking. Wait a minute, this is the same. And they sang, they were able to pick up on and it's funny how I think that with music, 'cause I know stutter or stammer is not a language, but it's a somewhat of a speech impediment, and it's like and that was so amazing to me. So it's just a story that I wanted to share. I was like, they did not really speak very great English, but when they were singing, they got, I mean, they nailed it. I was like, wow, the guy was flabbergasted.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Chris, Kathleen Tucker Collins says, who's first, she says, Wycliffe, I bought Hello Pop, it's one of my favorite CDs. And she wants to know, and I don't think I mentioned, Kenny Rampton, you aren't just a jazz or classical or Broadway player. You also toured with Ray Charles, right?
I did, yeah. That was my first road gig.
This is a popular culture music question, our first one for tonight. Singer Huey Lewis, I didn't know this, was diagnosed with Meniere's disease. And so he can't hear well enough to sing. So she's wondering, does that mean he'll never hear properly or be able to sing again? And then my question is, although it may be an invasion of privacy, so the first half's for Chris, second half is for Kenny. You know, it's interesting because, of course, Ray Charles had more highly developed hearing, obviously, because of being blind. So did out of tune bother him more in a physical way? Did intonation? So Chris, you addressed Meniere's disease. And then Kenny, if it's not a violation of privacy or, you know, the memory of Ray Charles, please tell us about how, you know, the hearing acuity in a blind person can be both a blessing and a curse. Chris, go.
Yeah, so Huey Lewis, you know, I did see an interview with Huey Lewis on this fairly recently on CBS in News, and it is tragic. So Meniere's disease affects, it's sort of degeneration of the inner ear, and the inner ear does a couple things. It allows you to start to hear, so that's where it's ruining his musical career because he's going deaf. The other part that it does is it affects balance. Your inner ear gives you balance, so he's having a lot of dizziness and difficulty even sort of standing at times when it flares up. So, you know, it will affect his ability because, you know, unfortunately, when you're deaf, I think that it'd be very difficult to be a singer, you know, when you lose your hearing. And that's why he decided to stop touring because he was losing his ability to sing in tune because he couldn't hear.
All right, Kenny.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Ray Charles and what he was feeling or experiencing, I really have no idea. I know he was very meticulous in what he wanted and what he expected of us as band members, and he demanded excellence at all times. And you know, he got it from it was a damn good band, you know. And in terms of how he was personally affected if something was out of tune. I really can't speak to that. I don't know how he felt. And I don't know that we were ever out of tune either.
That's really interesting to me because, you know, I always wondered, and again, Wycliffe and Chris both know this, every dog I've ever had that's been a yellow lab, we have a volunteer fire company nearby, and at 6 o'clock, the siren runs. And every dog we have ever had howls during the siren until they match the pitch. And then they keep their pitch of the howl with the siren.
Really?
Figure it out at all until after my surgery and everything was, you know, swollen up. And I had to howl with the siren to equalize the vibrations on the two sides of the eardrum.
Wow, interesting.
Yes. Is that normal or am I just a freak show? I mean, could be.
You're just a freak show.
Just, yes.
Yeah.
Good night.
Thank you.
On that note, great to see you, Wycliffe. Hey, man, I can be in touch soon about that other thing.
Great. All right, man. Take care.
Yeah, man.
Chris, Joseph, Cheryl Boga.
Thank you.
Cool. So, I mean, this is like, we have an alum, Aileen Roginski, who is a physical therapist in New York City who deals with, performing artists. And so she is, backstage at Broadway shows and concerts and stuff to take care of musicians with physical problems. And I guess it's interesting because I know of at least one major orchestra that has always given their players unlimited sick days because they don't want anybody to play injured on the assumption that if you play injured, it will make that injury more likely to become permanent. Is that like anything? Is that the first time you've ever heard of that, Chris?
Yeah, it's the first time I ever heard of that. But usually overuse injuries are the worst type, and you can't play through that. You see that in athletes, you see that in musicians. Sometimes you just have to take a break and rest. But yeah, no, I haven't. I would think it would be such a pleasure to come to play in an orchestra every day. I don't think they'd have to worry about people taking sick days unnecessarily. Again, I mean, it's, as Kenny was saying, just taking that 6 weeks off, how traumatic that was back in the day. I can't imagine it's the type of job that people want to play hooky from.
For me, even if I'm sick, I want to play because I feel better after. It heals me playing music. I can't count how many times I've gone in with a fever or a little bit sick to a show or a gig and come out and the fever is broken and I'm better. It's just for whatever reason. One other thing I wanted to mention that's come to mind, Chris, or is it Christopher? What do you prefer?
Chris is fine, yeah.
Hi, Chris. You mentioned something about Alzheimer's and studies being done with music. Now, somebody who was very close to me, who's passed away, he was like a second father to me. He was my trumpet teacher growing up in Las Vegas. Had Alzheimer's, and after he first got diagnosed and was showing symptoms, he had moments where I spent time with him where it was like he was somewhere else, and then times when he was fully present. And as kind of an experiment, I was at his house visiting my hometown and got my horn out and got him his horn, and we just started playing, and it just brought him back. And he was all of a sudden, like, from being like somewhere else to being 100% there and present. We started playing a monk tune and trading on it. Then we just started talking and sharing stories and laughing, and it was just like he went from over there to here through playing music. And then later on, as the illness got worse and worse, near the end, it got to the point where he was not too responsive. He was in a facility. And I came to town and spent some time with him, and I sat with him by his bed, and I'd hold his hand and talk to him. And he didn't really respond to much of anything anybody was saying unless I took my horn out and started playing for him, which I did in the facility. I put in a mute so it wouldn't disturb people, and I just sat next to him. I held his hand with one hand, and with the other hand, I played Round Midnight because he loved Miles Davis. I put a harmony mute and played it for him. And when I got to the bridge, he went, "Yeah, man."
Yeah.
And that's the first time he had spoken in days, through music and playing music for him. And it's just interesting how, through playing music, in my personal experience with him, who he's one of the most important people of my life, how I saw music was able to reach him when nothing else could. And I'd be very interested to understand or to read those studies in Alzheimer's and see if there would be some way possibly treating Alzheimer's through music.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if there is, but
it's interesting, but it's like one of the last things to go. Just like we can remember the lyrics to the song you haven't heard in 30 years. There's something about music that pulls the whole brain together and can pull Alzheimer's patients into that lucidity, that moment of lucidity. Before I was a doctor or anything, I was in high school. I remember volunteering at a nursing home in Pennsylvania when I lived there, and there was this guy who lived in the nursing home. He couldn't tell you his name, didn't know where it was, he didn't know the year, but you could tell him like 10 or 12 different old standard tunes, and he would sit down on the piano and play the whole tune and sing the whole song. And it was just amazing. And he did that all day long. He sat and he played these old jazz standard tunes. And even though you couldn't even tell you his name, he was able to play these complex songs and changes and the whole deal. And it was really interesting to me. And I hadn't thought about it at the time, but it is amazing how the music can organize the brain.
I would love to be part of some kind of a study to explore that somehow,
Yeah.
I'd volunteer my time to go to a hospital or whatever and just play for people and see if there's a way to help somehow and to develop that music as healing therapy for people.
Yeah.
You guys keep mentioning music we heard when we were a child, and I keep being reminded, like, my brother was a huge Beatles fan. Now, I never cared for the Beatles growing up, but I heard the Beatles all the time. And driving, and my brother gave me his collection, and I have it in my iPhone, in my like iTunes or whatever. So I connect my iPhone. I was driving one day, this is a couple of years ago, and I said, I feel like hearing some Beatles. Why not? So I put on the Beatles playlist, like of all the Beatles songs, random. I sang along with every single song and knew every lyric to every song. I never listened to it myself growing up. I never really honestly cared about it that much or cared for it that much, but yet I could sing every song. It's just funny how music, that vibration of musical notes attached to words connect to each other and to us and inside of our brains. It's kind of crazy, man. And I don't know what kind of studies have been done on that and why that is or how that is or anything, but it's so interesting to me, man.
Very interesting. Yeah.
I told the tale on one of my kids, I might as well bring the other into it so they can both be mad at me. My son, who of course you all know, Joseph, when he was a kid in school, he was, Joseph feels things very deeply. And so it was hilarious to me because whether he had a good day or a bad day, he turned to the same thing. He would get on the school bus, he would put his earbuds in, and there he went. And it was the same playlist, whether it was a good day or a bad day. He'd walk in the door. If he had a bad day, he'd walk in the door. He'd throw his book back and say, I had a terrible day. I need my trumpet. Where's my trumpet? And if he had a great day, he'd say, I had the best day ever. Where's my trumpet? Like, talk about multi-purpose. Talk about salve for all wounds and joy for all celebrations. That really has been the case. Somebody asks, Sarah Langenberger asks us to remind people that there are board-certified music therapists throughout the United States and the world, and the American Music Therapy Association website is a great resource to follow up for anyone looking for a music therapist or to learn more about music therapy. Thanks.
That's great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Joseph, did you have any questions coming into this that you said, like, boy, I hope somebody asked this, because it could be you?
Yeah, I actually wrote a couple down. Let me grab one here.
7 minutes left here.
I guess this would be more of a medical-based question, but in which fields of medicine, Chris, do you believe music therapy is most important?
Yeah, I think predominantly neurologic, okay, because because the brain and how music affects the brain. But in that cardiac study that I quoted earlier from Harvard, there's that mind-body connection. So the mind, when the mind is healed, it heals all sorts of other quote-unquote physical ailments, cardiac, or orthopedic or other. So it definitely, music can decrease pain. It can increase your stamina. I mean, all these things that it can do that affects the entire body, lower blood pressure, lower heart rates, all those kind of things. But I think as a predominant treatment, I think you see the most efficacy in neurologic conditions and behavioral health. So anxiety, post-traumatic stress, those kind of issues, I think see great improvement from music and music therapy, formal music therapy.
Thank you.
Cheryl, you're muted.
I have to do that at least twice a broadcast. How about like wrapping up? How about a wrap up? Kenny, well, we'll leave you to last because this was your brainstorm. You could wrap it all up. Joseph, how about you wrap it up? What do you think? What from the beginning to the end of this do you think about differently or more intensely?
I think it's definitely opened my eyes to include a type of music therapy consultation or to even recommend to patients who are maybe, because like I said before, I want to go into oncology. So a lot of the times, especially in the outpatient setting, you're going to have patients that are going to be sitting pretty much for 3 or 4 hours at a time, depending on the length of their chemo treatments, if they have to go to a facility. So I think even as the nurse, I would try to recommend listening to your favorite type of music or making a playlist before coming in to maybe reduce some of your anxiety, especially if they're new patients, or to try and offset some of the symptoms that might come with the chemotherapy treatment, like still anxiety, a lot of fatigue, even types of like maybe muscle cramps or aches. So I think that going into it, having a plan, especially with music and knowing the benefits of it, is super important.
It's interesting because when my oncologist was also wearing dual hats as the administrator of the cancer center, he put a piano in the chemo treatment room and had a loaned out, like he asked people to bring in CDs to donate, and old CD players, Walkman, that everybody had around and weren't using. So people could play piano. Or they could bring in somebody who played piano, or they could, sign out at the desk when they came in, something to listen and some CDs to listen to, which is pretty cool. Chris, wrap up.
Yeah, so I read a cool article in the New York Times last week that was kind of in this sort of the vein. And they referenced an article they published a couple of years prior about how the guitar is dead. Gibson is going out. It was, filed for bankruptcy. A lot of guitar companies were seeing greatly decreasing sales. And they were saying music's all becoming electronic and this and that, and the kids don't like that anymore. So during this pandemic, it's almost hard to buy a guitar. Music stores are sold out, and they can't even manufacture them quick enough. And it's because I think, during this pandemic, as people are locked in, they've lost all the stress. People are buying guitar, not that they're ever going to go out and play and gig and perform in front of people, but I think it just really speaks, without even knowing why they're doing it. It really speaks to this whole concept of music as a healing art, because even if you're no good, you can strum a 3-chord tune in your home and get that same benefit that somebody who's a world-class musician like Kenny can get performing trumpet. So my whole takeaway from this is encouraging people to make music part of their life. I think we underestimate the importance of music in our life. Music in our schools is radically important. I say things like, math and science and history and law, those are all important building blocks on that, allow us to live how we live. But music and the arts are why we live, and they stand up on their own. I'm an ardent supporter of the arts and music, and I really think we need to get everybody involved in music, even on a small level. I think everybody can get a little out of it. Just like you're seeing the students playing the violin. Beginner violin, they're getting benefit out of that. The same benefit as they may on their instrument, they have much more acuity on. So
I remember Father Panuska, our president for about 18 years. Somebody asked him in an interview, well, they don't have majors and they're not getting credit for this, so why do you spend all the money to offer this program. And his answer was, our goal as educators is not to teach them just to make a living, but more importantly, to teach them how to make a life.
Yeah.
And making
Amen.
is as important as making friends. And that was, they're almost his exact words. I remember them to this day. Kenny.
That's beautiful. Well, first of all, thanks again, Cheryl, for setting this up. It's really, I mean, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Anyways, whether it's or just on the phone,
Jewel.
you know. And Chris and Joseph, it's a pleasure to meet both of you.
Yeah.
I look forward to talking with both of you in the future and getting to know you. I can see this leading to friendships moving forward. And both of you gave some brilliant insight. Joseph, I love the idea of bringing music into the hospitals and into helping patients the way you just described. That's wonderful. And I mean, Chris, I mean, you're brilliant, man. So, I mean, music is, to me, music is life. You know, breath is life. We breathe to live. Music is the same thing. Without music, I don't know, you know, there's music in the air at all times. You know, one thing that's also a very important part of music is silence. I spoke recently with a friend of mine, a Russian trumpet player named Sergei Nikaryakov, who's probably the greatest living classical trumpet player today. He lives in Paris. And I asked him, "What are you listening to during COVID? What are you checking out?"
Holy
Yeah. And he said, "Man, I'm not listening to anything." He said, "I'm embracing the silence." Because the rest of the year, he's constantly listening to, rehearsing, practicing music to tour and constantly going, playing. He never has a chance to enjoy silence. So silence is just as important a part of music as the notes we play. And when you look at a world-class player who's saying he's embracing the silence, I think it's important for all of us to do that. You know, especially right now with all this going on in the world, with politics and all the negativity, the constant feed of all that. We can use music as an escape from that, which is what I do quite a bit. But it's also important, I think, actually, you mentioned, Chris, I think that your wife meditates, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important to do that, to spend some time in silence and to embrace that silence and find inner peace. It's easier said than done with all this going on. Some of us leave CNN on all day because we don't want to be, we want to be informed in spite of the fact that most of the information coming is making us crazy. But I think it's important to embrace some silence and use music as a way to heal ourselves, to find positivity, like Cheryl was talking about what Joe would do: get on the bus and put his earbuds, listen to music, come home, grab his trumpet, no matter what the day was, whether it was good or bad, balance it out, play some music. Those who aren't, professional musicians, like you mentioned, Chris, get a guitar. If you used to play clarinet in high school and now you've got a career, you don't play anymore, find that clarinet in your closet, dig it out, start to play, because to Chris's point also, music is meditation within itself. And I know if I go for a day or two without playing, I start to go a little crazy. I start to get, like that. As soon as I grab my horn, I start to play some long tones, everything evens out. I start to feel better. I start to see things in a more positive perspective. And so if you've ever played music, embrace it again. Make it a part of your life. Doesn't matter if you're a professional or not. It's going to enhance your life. I promise you. I've seen it happen with many friends that I've talked to about this I have a friend who found his old trombone, in the closet and hadn't played it in 15 years, started playing again and found out he has a passion for it and actually started a band. And, it will enhance your life. Let music do that for you. It's not going to hurt anything, and it's only going to enhance. And, the one thing that I tell students, I'll close with this. When COVID hit, I have a program in Las Vegas, my hometown, that I started. And we did everything we could to keep the kids engaged. And my message to them is life is about the process. It's not about the destination. And the process never ends. So those who, play music, there's always something new to learn. You can be the highest You know, you can be the best player in the world. Wynton Marsalis is always learning still. You know, he's always looking for something new to practice and to learn. And somebody on that level can still learn. I mean, the rest of us certainly can. You know, so that's one thing that I love about music is it's a never-ending journey of positivity. You know, and just one last thing about positivity, and this is a lesson I learned from Wynton a long time ago. I saw him addressing about 2,000 kids in an auditorium doing a Q&A. And he talked about positivity and how every situation that we're in has a positive side and a negative side to it. And it's important to be aware of both, be aware of the negative, but don't dwell on it. Find the positive and focus on the positivity. And that's how you find happiness in life. And, you know, Wynton used death as the ultimate example of a negative experience. You know, you lose a loved one. It's so difficult. But if you can find positivity in that, you know, and we just saw him a few months ago be a shining example of that when his father passed away, and the statement that he made publicly, you know, what he put out there was so beautiful and so profound, and there's so much to learn from that. So, like, if you can find positivity in every situation, which you can, embrace it, you know, and it's so important, you know, because all the negativity that's out there with all the politics and everything else right now is causing a lot of illness, in my opinion. It's causing a lot of people to get sick. I don't think it's a coincidence there's a pandemic going on right now. I don't think that's a coincidence, but that's a whole other show. But, you know, we can find the positivity in things. Like even through the pandemic, I've been able to engage all kinds of world famous, I'm not going to drop all the names, but artists to come in and do things like this with all the kids that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to. So I've been able to actually enhance kids' lives through programs I've created and bringing people like well, I'll mention a couple: Charles McPherson, Wynton Marsalis, Sherman Irby, Victor Goins, so many. We just had Dennis McCrell. So many opportunities that we can bring to the students because of COVID. You know, so COVID's in most ways, you know, it's very negative and it's killed a lot of people and made a lot of people sick. I mean, Cheryl was sick for, you know, she's dealt with it personally, and I have a lot of friends who have, and there's a lot of negativity, but there's positivity too. So I think it's very important to focus on the positivity. Beware of the negative, but focus on the positive because it's out there and it'll get us through everything. And what's one of the most positive things on the planet for me is music.
And I do think, to bring things kind of around full circle, thanks for handing me that on a silver platter, Kenny Rampton. Sensitivity is one of the things about making music. And I started out talking about resilience. It is about resilience. It's about dealing with what is and then deciding how to make it better. Because in order to deal with what is, if it's a deficiency you're addressing, you have to first give yourself credit for what isn't deficient. And so there's a positivity inherent in that. And then when you add to that, Chris, I think you missed the end of happy hour at the club. When you add to that what you're going to do is you're going to deal with the reality of what is and work at improving it. There's a positivity and a resilience to that. And I really, you know, I'm an extremely strong advocate for music education because it is so important. And, you know, it's interesting because when you hear of somebody cutting a sports program, you know, there's 1,000 people outside the school at the next school board meeting with, you know, pitchforks and signs, and they should be, because those kids for whom athletics is important have every right to have their ability to play sports happen. But by the same token, we need to do the same thing for our music programs. And I think that sometimes those of us who really are the advocates for that, we don't want to make noise, and I don't know what that's about. And I would like to see everybody listening to this broadcast write a letter to the editor of think of it as your admissions fee for the broadcast. The editor of a newspaper, call your local school superintendent. In some way, talk about why music is important in your life and in your family. and for your development, so that we shore things up before anybody does get an idea of cutting them, you know? I think it's really important that we let people, we have our voices heard. And I guess finally, this is like so cool. For me, music is how I met every single person you saw on this screen tonight. And, you know, Chris is like my second son, and second, Joseph's first. All right, wear that. So it's like here, and then you come in. Joe Link is one of the most delightful young men I have had the privilege of working with. And Kenny, I thank God for our friendship. And, you know, like 10 years ago, we didn't know each other. And of course, you know, Wycliffe is my brother. So music has brought so much into my life, completely apart from the wonderful things I hear and means of expressing myself, because it has brought a connection. Because of the common humanity that music brings throughout time, throughout space. Listening to music from, you know, many, many, many years ago, and it still touches the same thing that is at the core of our common humanity, whether that's love, heartbreak, pain. No matter where in the world you lived, if you're a human being or when you live there are things we have in common. And so that's how music brings us together, because it touches those things that are part of our common humanity. So thank you all for being here tonight and joining us. Thank you so much, Kenny, for the idea of this. Thank you, Christopher. I know that in the middle of COVID, you know, every minute you spent with us, you will have to make up for by foregoing sleep. And Joseph, I'll see you at work tomorrow, pal. Thanks to Janelle Decker for doing the being the go-between between Facebook and
Thanks, Janelle.
Thanks, viewers. Great questions. Keep your eyes peeled for the next one. I can't announce what it is yet because we don't have it nailed down, but it's really cool. Thanks, everybody.